and welcome to the annual presentation of the Simon-DeVos Prize for Philanthropic Leadership. We're honored to be joined by so many members of our community, by the sponsors of this prize, the family members and guests of the William E. Simon Foundation and the DeVos Family Foundation, and our 2022 prize winner, Ken Griffin. Ken is one of our nation's most generous philanthropists. And as you'll see tonight, he has worked tirelessly to advance the American dream and expand opportunities for people from all backgrounds, efforts that are so important to our roundtable community. Thank you, Ken, for your incredible philanthropic leadership. The Simon-DeVos Prize recognizes principled philanthropists who take on society's greatest challenges and inspire others to strive for excellence in giving. The Roundtable is honored to partner with the Simon and DeVos families to administer this prestigious prize. It's particularly fitting for the Simon-DeVos families to present this prize together, not only because they're both compassionate, courageous, and principled in their own philanthropy, but because this partnership is also rooted in a great friendship. Richard DeVos and Bill Simon Sr. had enormous respect for each other. They celebrated one another's accomplishments and truly believed in the ability of the free enterprise system to provide opportunities for all Americans to succeed. And as many of you know, these types of relationships with those who share our values and ideals, help us amplify our impact and improve lives through charitable giving. We're grateful for this year's selection committee for agreeing to serve and reviewing so many outstanding nominees. Thank you to Bill Simon Jr., Peter Simon, Pamela DeVos, Rick DeVos, Susie Kovner, Adam Meyerson, Jim Perry, and Bill Oberndorf. At this time, I'd like to introduce two members of the Simon and DeVos families, Peter Simon and Maria DeVos, to tell you more about this year's winner.
Thank you, Elise, for a very warm introduction. My name is Peter Simon. My dad was William E. Simon, known as Bill, and he is the inspiration for this award. He was a patriot and a man who achieved much throughout his life. He was an Army veteran, an entrepreneur. He served as Treasury Secretary under 2 presidents. He was also a philanthropist who believed in helping those in need to reach their potential. The Simon family is honored to partner once again with the DeVos family to administer this prize for philanthropic leadership and to recognize a living philanthropist who has shown exemplary leadership through his charitable giving. The Simon-DeVos Prize highlights the values proven to strengthen communities and improve lives: personality, responsibility, resourcefulness, volunteerism, scholarship, individual freedom, faith in God, and helping people to help themselves. With that, it is my pleasure to announce this year's recipient, which you already know, Citadel founder Ken Griffin. Ken's data-driven, scalable approach to charitable giving is focused on advancing the American dream, creating strong communities, and it's no stretch to say his efforts have at times saved lives. He is devoted to a range of causes and initiatives, including expanding access to high-quality education, advancing medical research, breaking down barriers to economic success, and reducing violent crime. His support for the arts and for enhancing public spaces has made our communities, notably in Chicago and Miami, more inspiring places to live. His work at the height of COVID-19 pandemic also led the creation of safe and effective vaccines, and even brought hundreds of Americans trapped in Wuhan in early 2020 safely home. Quite a story. Let's take a deeper look at the impact of Ken's generosity and why he is so deserving of the Simon-DeVos Prize.
We are educating currently 21,000 kids, K-12. We're the 5th largest school district in New York State. We were #1 in student achievement as a district across the entire state of New York. We were not just closing the achievement gap, we were reversing it at a moment of incredible need when we were opening a very large number of middle schools. Ken stepped in and said, we will fund the startup costs.
Thousands of families are able to rest assured that their children have a place to go for middle school. I don't really know if people really understand the impact of that. You have a school across the street from your home, but you can't send them there because they have an F. Success Academy has changed my daughter's lives and other lives in my community in terms of building their confidence. Here at Success Academy, our scholars are well prepared to do anything. I have this school that my scholars are attending, and I can confidently say they will be able to go to middle school and now a high school.
We have been the beneficiaries of his incredible generosity, but really our country has been the beneficiary of Ken's unwavering commitment to opportunity and unwavering commitment to quality public education.
I had the incredible privilege to meet Ken Griffin as we were working on an incredibly complex problem trying to get Americans out of Wuhan, China. Families and people in Wuhan that were about to be locked in, goodness knows how long it was going to take to get them out. There was so much enormous uncertainty at this time. Ken and I had this conversation. He said, I have some resources, I have some ability, I have access to some airplanes. We didn't have a plan B other than Ken and his team. We had put all of our eggs in the singular basket of what Ken would be able to deliver for us. And in the end, the amount of people who came home totaled in the hundreds. It could have been as many as 800 people that we were actually able to bring back. And together, we took down that risk in a way that ultimately delivered a remarkable outcome. Ken's efforts to lay the groundwork for Operation Warp Speed were legion, and he convinced President Trump and a bunch of our team members that Operation Warp Speed was worthy, that it was important, and that it could ultimately lead to success, and in fact it did. Ken's work to help us focus, connect with scientists doing truly cutting-edge work, shortened the time barrier to bring these vaccines to market, and saved millions of lives and billions of dollars, which in turn saved countless millions more lives. And we can all say thank you to Ken for the work that he did, because it actually saved people's lives, rescued Americans from tough places, and got America a really good outcome. This was money well spent.
We're an independent research organization based at the University of Chicago, really focused on trying to improve safety and justice for Chicagoans, but also to create a model for the rest of the country. We were fortunate enough that Ken Griffin was willing to make a really big bet investment on a moonshot initiative, which is to invest significantly in the human capital of police officers as well as community violence organizations. If you think about the job of policing, it's one of the most complex jobs that you have. You're constantly having to make decisions on the fly that can have life and death consequences. And so one of the things that policing has not invested in enough in this country is helping officers make those high stakes decisions. And what we've seen in measuring the impact of this training that was given to over 1,000 Chicago police officers is that it's both reducing uses of force, it's reducing officer injuries, it's reducing complaints against officers, and perhaps most importantly, the officers love this training.
his philanthropy has not only helped the citizens of Miami, it's redefined philanthropy in Miami, which I think is even more significant. He's been very careful in what he's chosen to support. For example, Miami Connected, which is giving children who are on free and reduced lunch in our public school system free Wi-Fi for 2 years, right? Free broadband connection. And then things like the Underline, which is a major linear park. But they're significant gifts. He's done them continuously. And I think he sent a message to this community that giving is part of your responsibility. And he thinks that because of his success, he wants to share in that success with other people. Ken is deserving of the award because everything he's about is helping other people. And he is about making the right choice in how to strategically do that and do it in ways that are significant.
What he has done is really, I think, still far too rare in philanthropy, and that's to be incredibly data-driven, incredibly solutions-oriented, willing to take risks, willing to work on the hardest problems.
Ken Griffin's donations and his support to Success Academy is beyond words. I can't thank him enough. And the community cannot thank him enough.
Thank you for being you and doing all that you've done for society.
For the countless of American lives and lives all around the world that you saved, you are deeply deserving of this reward. God bless you, and on behalf of the United States of America, thank you for all you did for our country at this incredibly difficult time.
That was a great video. Well done. I am Maria DeVos, and I'm proud to represent the whole DeVos family today to present this wonderful prize. As you have all just seen, Ken's philanthropic accomplishments are extraordinary. Not only is he a true champion and advocated for those communities where he lives and does business, whether it's Chicago, New York, or Miami, but his generosity has touched and at times helped transform lives of so many around the country as well. We are grateful for Ken's inspirational philanthropic leadership, his commitment to effective charity, his courage to invest in the causes he believes in. Please join me in welcoming Ken Griffin to the stage. Ken, on behalf of the Simon-DeVos families, we are thrilled to present you with the 2022 Simon-DeVos Prize for Philanthropic Leadership and the $200,000 award, which is payable to the charity of your choice. Thank you for your incredible work in so many areas, helping Americans to pursue their dreams and create real change and opportunities in communities across this country. You are truly deserving of this honor. Congratulations on behalf of all of us.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to all give a nice applause for Eva Muskowitz, who is going to come up and give us a conversation with Ken. She's the CEO and founder of Success Academy. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you so very much.
So exciting to be here, and this prize is so deserving. As everyone has said, your philanthropic leadership, your business leadership, I would say societal leadership, is really inspiring to all of us here, to Americans broadly. So I just thought I would start by asking, how do you think about philanthropic priorities? There are so many problems in the United States, so many problems in the world. How do you prioritize what you should, how you should focus your charitable giving?
So it's a great question. Let me first just thank the Simon and the DeVos family for their commitment to encouraging Americans to participate in our society and to make the differences that so many people in this room have made to make our country a better place. I'd like to, of course, recognize the Philanthropic Roundtable for organizing this incredible event tonight and over the course of today. And again, it's providing the intellectual capital to help us all make better decisions to address the very questions that you just asked. And then before going to that question, I would just like to say, like, I'm number one in your fan club. I'll share a quick personal story. You may know this, you put together videos of your students being accepted to college. And one of the most powerful moments in my family was to have my young children watch the videos of your children being admitted, whether it was to Brown or to MIT, and to see just their colleagues so proud in each other's success and in their accomplishment. And you truly are changing the lives of children in New York. And that goes back to your question, which is, I tried to think about what causes can I support that when watched and studied, we will push across our country. How do we have a Success Academy in every city in America? Because what you've demonstrated is the ability to transform the lives of children that in many parts of the country are written off to they're demographically challenged, they're socioeconomically challenged. That's just the way it is. And you've proven that's just malarkey. That with the right leadership, the right teachers, the right curriculum, the right commitment from the parents, and the students being held to high expectations, they can deliver. So one of the things that we look for in all of our giving is ways to have supporting models that are scalable. So in education, I think Success Academy is a leader. On the video, they spoke about the crime lab at the University of Chicago. Early adopter of at the time, simplistic machine learning technologies, but to dispatch public safety officials in a way that markedly reduced crime. And as you and I both know, one of the real challenges in our inner cities is that students that grow up in a crime engulfed area they're under constant stress. It makes it much harder to plan for a future when you have to worry so much about getting through the day. Like the idea of I'm gonna go to college and live the American dream. Wait a second, I just need to get across the street and live. And in Chicago, that's a real issue. So again, we're thinking about scalable models. That's a big focus in what we do in our charitable giving with my team that works with me at Citadel. And I'd like to emphasize that point. It's a team effort. I'm really, really fortunate to be surrounded both with Kaysen, who leads our charitable giving, and then to be in an environment where there's so many bright people that are expressive in their views, that are thought-provoking in what they bring to the table, that has really helped us make better decisions over time.
Well, we have benefited so much, Ken, from your generosity at Success and your focus. I have been taken by some of your very sort of pithy statements about sort of the problems and dilemmas that we're in. And I just want to quote from a statement that you made around education. You said, "Our lack of investment," I quote, "in public education specifically has put a detour sign in the middle of the on-ramp to the American dream." And I'm wondering if you can unpack for us why this issue is so critical to opportunity and how you see that playing out if we don't solve the crisis.
Well, let's be clear. We live in a world today that, as was expressed earlier, is data-driven. It's analytically focused. If you do not have a command of reading, writing, science, and mathematics, you are in a very difficult position in society moving forward. And as a country, we're graduating roughly a quarter of the STEM graduates that, for example, China graduates. So we really have to come together as a nation to teach our children critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, and then the very core fundamental math, science, reading, writing that has been lost in much of the American school system. I mean, the amount of emphasis on issues that just will not develop minds is really heartbreaking in many of the schools in our country that have been engulfed by wokeism. So education to me is very important. Now, the statement, the quote's accurate. The bottom line is America spends enough on education.
It's almost $1 trillion a year for K-12. Little shy of.
And the amount that gets lost in bureaucracy, administration, union work rules, the willingness to tolerate poor performing teachers in the classroom, not holding students accountable and responsible, because kids will rise to the occasion. We spend enough as a country, but we're not getting the value for our dollar.
And are you discouraged? You don't seem so, but one could be discouraged. I mean, you quoted I think it's China is producing 5 times the number of engineers, and yet some folks believe that we can still be technologically dominant and that somehow we will work our way out of it. Are you optimistic that we can, or?
Some days the glass is half full. Look, you have to always keep in mind the two competing realities. Number one is in our country, I said I'm number one in your fan club. We have great leaders achieving remarkable results. And what is frustrating is in this day and age of social media, where you could theoretically have access to so much insight and knowledge, we still allow so many of our government managed functions to deliver, frankly, just a very poor quality of service. And I saw it in Chicago, I saw it firsthand. I saw the struggles of principals trying to help their students, running into the rigidity of the union work rules that would prevent classes from being offered in schools, that would prevent students from having extra time with their teachers. That would protect teachers that had lost the passion to teach. It was really sad. So I think the key is we can't lose hope, because if we lose hope, who carries the ball forward?
And do you think that some of the challenges relate to sort of a loss of core values? I mean, I'm operating in a world where, teachers can be hostile to capitalism, or can be hostile to testing, can be hostile to merit, things that are pretty basic to our country and, you would think, American values. To what extent do you think some of the challenges in education relate to an abandonment of core values?
So I think significantly more today than just 3 years ago. I think it's horrifying how the pandemic completely turned upside down the social norms within schools and in the relationship between faculty and administration. I think it's horrifying. And I will tell you that having recently moved my family from Chicago to Miami, by the grace of God, we are here. The schools here, so much more focused on education, so much less focused on ideology. And the ideology that was being taught to my kids was not healthy. I mean, my son's American history started with the Salem witch trial, and sort of, slavery is the big climax, and there's no moment where we actually chartered out for the world the concept of freedom and individual rights. And we saved the world in World War I and did it again in World War II. I mean, American history definitively has its dark side, but I'd like my child to be proud of this country. And I think that we've lost that in many of our schools across America in this moment of almost self-hatred. And that's gonna take away the hope that we need to have to come to the table every day to fight for what's right and what's needed. Like, what's the point if you're hopeless? So the self-hatred is a really troubling phenomena that I think is gripping much of education in America today.
And how do you see the way out of that quagmire? What do you think the country needs to do to regain its core values footing?
So you need to keep fighting the fight.
I intend to.
And I will tell you, our founding fathers, they were geniuses. And the federal system, I think, will actually demonstrate its power over the next 20 years. I look at the vibrancy and the culture of South Florida, and it is so refreshing to be in an environment where people look forward to the future. And contrast that with a city that I called home for 30 years, which effectively devolved into anarchy, and where people would spend their time talking about the misery, the crime, the corruption, and the hopelessness. And I think that over the next 20 years, we're going to see the power of the federal system play out. And I think, frankly, that will help to push the pendulum back to a better place. When people see states like Florida, states like Texas, just perform markedly better than some of the states that have really lost their way in the last few years.
And not to sort of over-index on K-12 because you've been such a leader in higher education and so many other critical policy areas. It's obviously just my favorite topic. You've done amazing work, as the video showcased, on really intervening in life-threatening immediate situations like transporting Americans out of Wuhan and Operation Warp Speed. I'm wondering if you can give us any visibility into sort of your thinking at that moment in time where you decided to step up in this major way. How were you thinking about the state of the country, the state of the world when you made that decision?
With respect to the crisis in Wuhan?
And the COVID crisis, just in general.
So one of the great strengths of my firm is the diversity of our talent, which comes down to we are a meritocracy. We look for the best people from around the world. I would say roughly half of my senior leadership team was born outside of America. And these are truly remarkable people. And my colleagues from China were much more aware of the unfolding pandemic than my fellow American colleagues that were born here in the United States. I mean, we're all Americans, but if you're born in China, you're on WeChat, this is front and center. If you're born in the United States, the CDC is going to save you. And I mean, all the movies, they're like the people that make it all happen. It's just incredible. But that gave us a bit of a front row seat to this issue. And then having a family that was in Wuhan as the borders are being sealed and having to grapple with how do we bring this family home? It puts you right in the middle of the situation. Sometimes the problems come to you. And the problem came to me. And it was an absolute pleasure to work with Secretary Pompeo. He was a phenomenal man to work with on just the triage of how do we bring not not a few hundred Americans home. It was originally going to be one flight of Americans leaving Wuhan, but to actually bringing all the Americans home from Wuhan. And he was an absolute, just phenomenal partner to work with in solving that problem, because China's trying to close its borders down. We brought these people back to our country. How do we make sure they don't bring the virus with them? Right, that was a really tangible concern at that moment. And how do we deal with some of the just very sensitive nuts and bolts international relations issues? Chinese were very sensitive to this, as you know, at the start of the pandemic. And I think it was one of those great moments where American business and American government worked together. And I would like to think that we as a country would embrace that. I think that was something that President Trump was really good at doing, was reaching out to the American business community for ideas, for thoughts, for inspiration. They were night and day different than many of the previous or current administrations on that issue. Because a lot of American CEOs, the environment that I'm in, incredibly stimulative. You get a lot of perspectives and ideas that you can share with people who live in the bubble of Washington, D.C. And you can make a difference with those ideas.
Wow, that's an incredible story, an incredible feat, and the patriotism is inspiring. Imagine being one of those 800 Americans trapped there. That just is very emotional.
But it's America at its finest. There's a problem, and we're going to solve it. And that's the ethos that we need to bring back to America, which is we're going to be realistic about our problems, and we're going to solve them. And we're not going to whine about them, and we're not going to complain about them, we're not going to say they can't be solved. We're going to go back to the ethos of how do we get it done?
And what do you think it's going to take? I mean, we had that at one point, in many points in American history, and we seem paralyzed by very basic, whether it's crime in Chicago or schooling. The story of the creation of the COVID vaccine seems to be one area where people worked together and figured it out faster than any vaccine had ever been made before.
The COVID vaccine R&D effort is truly one of the triumphs of mankind. We all wish it was more effective, like the polio vaccine, but let's be clear, being sick is much better than being dead.
Yes.
And it really is a remarkable triumph of what they accomplished, both at Pfizer and at Moderna in the early generations of this, along with other companies around the world that had other vaccine alternatives. What always bothers me is if you win the Super Bowl or you win the NBA, you're invited to the White House and you're celebrated for your accomplishments. Why did we never bring the scientists from Moderna to the White House and celebrate their remarkable accomplishment?
You're so right. You're so right. It was phenomenal. I mean, usually it takes 9 to 11 years to create a vaccine.
And those were some tough conversations I had with the White House early on in the pandemic. The president's like, we're going to have a vaccine by this summer. It's like, Mr. President, that's not assured. In fact, we're still waiting for the HIV vaccine. So it was not particularly fun to be on the phone with the President of the United States and throwing a bit of cold water on the situation. We've got to think about alternatives as a country to live with this virus with or without a vaccine. And thankfully, our scientific community rose to the occasion and did solve this problem. And they did it at warp speed. I mean, it is a remarkable accomplishment. It's the Manhattan Project of our generation.
And what do you attribute that ingenuity, determination, success? What would you attribute that to?
Look at your best graduates.
I mean, I think it's
look at your best graduates. Look at the perseverance and the grit and the determination that they have to come up in the environment that they're in, to get through Success Academies, and to go to the best schools in our country. Or they've come from abroad. Many of the best scientists in America are born somewhere else, and they come here for the opportunity to be Americans.
And do you see this cooperation either between business and government, or sort of the coalescing around solving a problem a la Operation Warp Speed? Do you think that that ethos, what would it take to apply that to crime or schooling or any other ill that we face?
So I think what really frustrates both of us is most of these problems we already know how to solve.
Yes.
I mean, that's what's so frustrating is, I don't take this the wrong way. We have your Curriculum for Success Academy. You could definitively write out what defines a qualified teacher. We definitively know the physical infrastructure we need for students to succeed in. And then we know the cultural norms and the socio-emotional environment they have to be a part of to develop and flourish. What's so frustrating is we don't actually have to solve an intellectual problem. We simply need to execute. Like that, I think, is, if you ask like what really just gnaws at me, it's like, why can't we find the force of will to do right, in this case, by our children, and holistically by our country?
No, it is enormously frustrating, and I always say, education is distinct from finding the solution to COVID because we know what works. We know phonics teaches children to read. We know that order and civility are good for raising children, and yet there's a political will issue rather than a knowledge gap. What do you see, though, as the lever there? If it's not a knowledge gap, how do we, and how can people in this room who are philanthropists, how can we go about, as methodically as you have, solving these issues?
Well, I think it's incredibly important that, and many of us in this room are going to fall in the following category. We work hard, we keep our noses down, we stay focused on the mission. We're not looking for fame. Like, that's not the driver. The driver is the sense of accomplishment. But I do think it's really important that we celebrate our successes and make sure the country knows what can be done. So, for example, the work that you do with your videos that I share with my children, like, this can happen. And how do we proselytize these ideas so that people that are in the inner city go like, you know what? There is a way that my child could have an education. It happens in New York. It happens at Success. Why can't it happen here in XYZ city?
Well, I think,
Like, we can't be shy in celebrating our wins because it's a way to help others embrace what may be possible. The most powerful thing that we have in our firm in making innovation happen is often just knowing that a competitor solved the problem. You have no idea how powerful that is to get a group of people to solve the problem within your four walls. They solved it. And all of a sudden, the problem that couldn't be solved is solved 14 days later because 8 people sat in a room, worked 7 days a week because they weren't going to be beat. Nothing like seeing problems solved inspires others to solve problems too.
Well said. And I think part of the challenge is that, there's this pessimism about the country or about the level of inclusivity. And of course, there's more work that can be done. But, you've been able to see the glass is half full, and what problems can you solve, and where can we innovate, and where do these, I hate to call them old-fashioned values because they seem very fashionable to me, but hard work, grit, ingenuity, creativity, how do we ensure that the country embraces those? Do you have any guidance or thoughts or advice?
I really think if you want the country to embrace those values, tone from the top matters a lot. And it's been a long time since we've had a clear message from the top about the importance of those values. And the American public will have a chance to vote again in 2 years about the tone from the top. And I hope that in both parties, I hope that we have exceptional candidates. I hope on both sides we have exceptional candidates. The American public has a chance to choose between 2 really great people to lead the country from the top, because that's where the biggest impact comes from. I mean, if we look back at the leadership from Ronald Reagan, we need to take a step back to that moment in time if we want to achieve our dreams of securing the future for our country. He was really good that this country could be the shining light, both domestically and internationally. We need to get back to that moment in time.
Yeah, I think that is so important that you're saying leadership on both parties. We want Americans to have good choices.
Both parties.
And it makes the dialogue so much richer if we have strength and leadership on both sides of the aisle.
You know, the New York Times ran this article. It was about Rahm Emanuel and me as being the odd couple. And they really didn't know where to go with this article because they wanted to paint this as like the billionaire and the politician. There must be something askance here. Like they couldn't help themselves, the New York Times. But he was a phenomenal mayor and a phenomenal partner. You can accomplish, I mean, he and I would agree on 80% of issues. By the way, that's a remarkable percent for any two people to agree on any set of issues. And for both of us, K through 12 education was so important because we both viewed K through 12 education as the on-ramp to the American dream. That's how you have the chance. I went to a public high school. My parents, my father was the first in his family to go to college. We all got to where we were on education. Like my grandmother grew up with no running water. She saw man land on the moon. She grew up with no running water. I mean, it's hard to even imagine that life. So K through 12 education was an area that Mayor Emanuel and I had just great passion around together. And there were a number of areas that we had great passion around together. And I think the key was, rather than sit there and squabble about the 10 or 15% you don't agree on, put wins on the board on the 85% you do. And in Chicago, that was public safety, that was the crime labs, and he was incredibly supportive. He was incredibly supportive of working with the private sector and improving our Chicago public schools. We had meaningful increases in student performance under his leadership. You can find wins working with people on both sides of the aisle.
And we're getting towards the end of our time, and I want to make sure you have an opportunity for any closing thoughts. But I wanted to ask you this question about your philanthropy. On the one hand, you're so data-driven and so analytical about what solutions are scalable. But what personally animates you to give?
I'm going to turn the tables around for a second. You've literally committed your entire life to giving. What drives that?
I love children, and I love the American dream, like you. It's such an important dream. There is no French dream. There's no other country dream. There's the American dream. And so that dream, keeping that dream alive and making the dream a reality as much as possible for as many people as possible. But I guess, I think it's easy, to not, I guess I see that you have a deep caring. And I've always felt that we've had that in common, that you are invested in American society and care about American people greatly. And so I assume it's similar for you, but I wanted to ask you that.
I'm certain it's similar because I've lived the American dream. And as I said, my grandmother grew up with no running water, and her grandson graduates from Harvard. Starts a business at the age of 20, and 33 years later has one of the greatest teams in the world in finance. This is not a Swiss story, it's not a German story. It's a story that for most of our lifetime could only have been written here in America. And I know the sacrifices that her and her husband made for her children to have the American dream. And I'm grateful that for me, she was my financial aid package to Harvard. She cared that all of her grandkids had a great education, and she put all of us through college, which is a remarkable feat for, again, somebody who grew up with nothing. Her husband grew up with nothing. They built a mid-sized business in the Midwest, the local car dealer, the local gas station. And both my grandfather and her were deeply committed to their community and deeply committed to the importance of education.
Well, thank you, Ken, for this conversation tonight, but more importantly, your vision and all the work you've done to make America even better than it is. So thank you very, very much. And Hannah Shu, a third-generation member of the DeVos family, is going to talk more about the Simon-DeVos Prize. Thank you, Hannah, so very much.
Thank you both. That was incredibly insightful and engaging conversation. My name is Hannah Shu, and on behalf of my family, the DeVos family, and the Simons, I'd like to offer our congratulations again to Ken for such a well-deserved honor. Your contributions that have strengthened our free society and expanded access to opportunities for all people are a reminder of what's possible through private philanthropy. Your generosity is an inspiration to all of us in this room, and we sincerely thank you for all you've done to improve the lives of so many. So thank you everyone for joining us and for participating in tonight's presentation, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.